Hi everybody, welcome back to the Looney Bin. My name is Looney and welcome to this month's shipping in video where I go into what the shipping community was like for many forms of different media such as anime, manga, and even, light novels, video games, and so on. In today's video, the topic, media of entertainment, we're going to go over and talk about the shipping community and what it was like is, well, if you could guess by the shirt, Pokemon. This is a Mega Charizard X. You know what? There's been so many different forms of Pokemon in the recent years that I don't remember anymore. But yes, we're going to talk about the shipping community of Pokemon. And I was part of the shipping community for Pokemon for a very, very long time. Now, the shipping community for Pokemon, I think, didn't really get really big, at least in the terms of at least it was knowledgeable by the community until the internet really became as big as it is with different forms of social media. It especially got big during the days of forums. And one of the biggest forums was, of course, Cerebi.net, where I was a frequent user because I used to enjoy Pokemon games a lot. I have kind of fell off of it in more recent times. The last time I was excited for any sort of Pokemon game, essentially, was X and Y, and I also played Sun and Moon. Both were excellent games. I just never really, got invested again in Pokemon for a while, right? But that's not what we're going to be talking about. We're talking about the shipping community. And of course, as I do with most of these shipping in videos, I want to tell you, face to face what I do ship in Pokemon, just to give you some sort of just understanding of where I am looking at in terms of my point of view of the shipping community in Pokemon, right? So when Pokemon first started, I think I was 8 years old. I was a big supporter of the Ash and Misty ship because, frankly, based off of what the anime was showing us, especially the dub version of the anime, it definitely pointed towards Ash and Misty being a really, really popular ship that will become canon. In fact, there was a end credit scene of the first Pokemon movie back, before even season 2 and Pokemon Gold and Silver announced, where they showed a scene that was supposed to be in the movie where it's a they leap forward in time to essentially a scene where what appears to be Ash and Misty's daughter asking Misty about where is Ash, where is her father, right? And that got a lot of people into oh wow, oh my god, Ash and Misty are canon, oh my goodness gracious. And I could understand why, right? Because as I was watching the original Pokemon anime, you could kind of see it. You could definitely see that trope of the dense, male character and the hothead, kind of tsundere type character that, really, really, really deep down liked, the main character, but didn't understand her feelings or was struggling with her feelings. And that was what attracted me to that ship, right? It's what attracted me to seeing all them moments throughout the original anime and then so on and so forth until the ending to the Pokemon Johto season, where we see Misty kind of contemplating about what's their relationship between Ash and Misty, and I was like, oh my god, that's exciting. And I was wondering how they will end it. Turns out it didn't necessarily end with the confirmation of Ash and Misty being a canon ship, because Ash moved on to the Hoenn region, right? But that was an exciting time for me as an Ash and Misty shipper. As I got older and as more Pokemon seasons gone along, I kind of went away from the Ash and Misty ship, probably because there wasn't any more interaction with them until Misty showed up in the Hoenn region in that one episode with Togepi, well, 2 episodes with Togepi, right? But really, my shipping preferences in Pokemon slowly just swayed it away. Right? Eventually, at some point, when I heard rumors of when they were going to start doing the Pokemon X and Y anime, there was rumors originally that, the female character during that season, Sedona, was going to have a crush on Ash. I was like, whoa, hold on a second here. Okay, you got me intrigued now. You're slowly bringing me back to Pokemon. It's a stupid reason to get back into Pokemon, but you're slowly bringing me back into Pokemon because, wait, hold on a minute. You're actually going to tell me there's actually going to be a female character who legitimately will have a crush on Ash? Okay, that gained my interest as a shipper of just almost anything, like a big shipper. Okay, you got me back invested into Pokemon. Now, there were hints of Ash and Misty throughout the first season, the Orange Islands and the Johto League, right? There were hints of an Ash and Misty ship and them being together, right? But there never really was a pure confirmation of Misty having a crush, even though it was blatantly obvious that she did. In this case, with the Pokemon X and Y season, Sedona did have like a legitimate crush, and that was part of her entire story arc as the season went on, and that got me invested. I watched literally every single, Pokemon episode of that season. And I was like, okay, so they can write romance. It's just that they pick and choose when they want to. But at the end of the day, Ash is still that guy, that dense character that is unaware of these feelings these characters have for him. And that's part of the frustration was as a Pokemon shipper, especially with Ash, because it's like you could kind of get it from the female character's perspective, but not really from Ash's perspective. And it's just like, ugh, come on, Ash, stop being so dense. It's like Ash was one of the densest characters in Pokemon, and as a shipper, it was frustrating. But that was where I essentially was in the Pokemon shipping community. I was a big supporter of Ash and Misty, kind of fell off when, Misty wasn't as around as much, and kind of moved away from Pokemon a little bit until the Amore season, the Amore shipping, aka the Pokemon X and Y season, and that got me back invested. And then after that, I checked out Sun and Moon, which, by the way, great animation. I also fall off a little bit of shipping, but it was I've been a little bit all over the place in terms of Pokemon shipping. So that's where I am coming in to this video, and I'm gonna at least give you some sort of hindsight and insight into my perspective of what the shipping community was like, right? So now that we got that out of the way, and now you know my preferences and what I liked, let's talk about exactly what the shipping community was like in Pokemon. Well, frankly, it's pretty obvious what the shipping community is in Pokemon. It's freaking huge. It is by far one of the biggest shipping communities of any sort of media. It's really big, right? To the point where they literally have several pages on Bulbapedia that talk about many different ships that have existed in Pokemon. And I'm talking about a lot of ships. They have names for crack ships, names of ships that you didn't even think was a possibility, right? They have names, which by in part I thought was one of the coolest things about the Pokemon shipping community is that each ship had some sort of unique name. For example, Ash and Misty were Poke shipping, right? You also had Ash and Serena as Amore shipping, May and Drew as Contest shipping, Rocket shipping, or Jesse and James was a big ship as well. It was just so cool just seeing all these different names. But with as big as the shipping community was in Pokemon, unfortunately what it also caused and what it also did is fuel the flames of shipping wars. There's going to be a lot of people with different opinions and different likes. And what that causes is constant shipping wars, constant fuels for, people wanting their ship to be canon, right? And by far, there was a lot of wars fought over who Ash was going to end up later on in the series. Of course, as it was a children's show, most people didn't necessarily think that, any ship would become canon, at least story-wise, because guess what? It's a kid's show. Most of the time, kids don't necessarily pay attention to the romance part. They care about the Pokemon. They care about the battling, right? But, there are some kids, like myself, who actually enjoyed the romance aspect, who enjoyed seeing shipping, right? So we were invested in that, alongside, the Pokemon and Pokemon battles and the story and the lore of Pokemon and so on and so forth. But for the most part, they really never really hard focused on it, right? But there were instances where they did kind of mention it. And a lot of kid shows do this as well, right? But I think that because of the never providing the closure, never providing the hard evidence for a lot of these ships, that's where a lot of the shipping fuel and shipping war came from. Never really, focusing on what they really want as who Ash will end up. There are mostly, hints that, Ash will end up with Misty, and there's been several hints of that, right? But for the most part, they never were like solid and never really gave anyone the hard lock for, Poke shipping. And that's what caused a lot of more of these wars, because if you don't really confirm that, you're going to get these constant fights. Even if you do confirm it, there will also be people who believe that, it still isn't canon, right? But, as I said before in whenever I talk about shipping, is that you can ship wherever you want. If something becomes canon, at least respect the canon of what the authors have chosen. You may not like it. You can criticize, the choice and like the writing of between the two characters, but at least respect the choice, because that's what the authors wanted. They never really did that with Pokemon shipping because it was a constant. They kept on, making Pokemon seasons, making more Pokemon anime, and, because Pokemon is the richest company in the world right now, entertainment company in the world, right? They can do that. That's all they did. It's just constant and continuous making new seasons. A lot of that fueled more of the shipping war. And, you had constant people who ship Poke shipping, who ship, Amore shipping, or any ship with Ash. All of that, everyone fought each other to try to, just be correct. Be the ones to say, yes, our ship is more canon than your ship, and so on and so forth. There's a lot more evidence, I would say, for Poke shipping than any other Ash ship aside from Amore shipping, because I think Amore shipping, at least it giving, Sedona some sort of crush on Ash that was like very, in your face. There was still the constant debate about whether or not, who is going to be with Ash at the end of the series. The series technically did end with Ash's story, where he did win the biggest championship that you can get. They didn't necessarily confirm any ship though, so it's still up in the air. So the constant shipping war will continue to happen, right? And because Ash's story is now finished, we may not never get a conclusion unless they come up with a new movie or something like that, right? But essentially, the shipping community and the shipping wars that did occur in the Pokemon shipping community was between Ash and whoever he will end up. Aside from ships that are included with Ash, there's many other different ships, right? You had ships with minor characters. You had ships with Brock. You had ships with Jesse and James. You have ships with other ships with Misty, like Misty and Tracy. You have, May and Drew. There's many different ships, vastly different ships in the Pokemon community. Each one of them has like their own shipping war that are just catered to them specifically, and really they fight with each other depending on which character, is involved in the ships, right? I would say like there are more mini battles of ships in among the shipping community in Pokemon than any other community, right? Because there's just so many characters. They have so many ships that people enjoy, that people love. Even ships that are just crack ships, right? And it's constant debates, constant fights, because the Pokemon Company doesn't necessarily confirm, unless you read the manga where Jesse and James get married, right? But for the most part, there's never been a confirmation within the anime or even with the games, right? Because with the games, you have even more characters like Brendan and May as a ship, right? And Red and Green and stuff like that, if I remember correctly, right? But like all of that, just so many characters, just so many people just invested in so many ships that there are constant battles. I would say the biggest battles of the shipping community definitely will revolve around who Ash will end up. And constant people will continue to debate and fight and, have these shipping wars trying to determine, why this ship is better and why that ship is better for Ash. But for the most part, the shipping community in general was just very much mini battles. This happened in many, places such as forums, such as, social media websites, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, right? All these places had these shipping wars trying to figure out, which ship is the most popular, which ship, garnered the most, popularity, which I still think is Poke shipping to this day, because a lot of people, grew up with the original Pokemon anime and enjoyed Pokemon Misty, right? Pokemon Misty, Ash and Misty, jeez. And which, by the way, now that I talk about like something like that, there are ships that involve Pokemon and, human characters. There's that part of the community. I'm not gonna say anything about that because I'm not gonna judge anybody with it. I mean, if the Pokemon Company themselves make like these weird lore stories that got leaked at some point, whether or not it was proven to be debunked or anything like that, that community exists. I'm not even gonna say it doesn't. It does exist. So there's even that portion of the shipping community. Like I said, there's just so many characters in Pokemon that like it's just constant debates. It will always be constant debates because they never confirm anything. They want you to keep talking. They want you to just keep shipping characters, even if you believe there's no chance of these characters getting together. Until the Pokemon Company themselves actually confirm any of this, people are just going to continue shipping. These shipping wars are never going to end. That's just the biggest part of the shipping community in Pokemon. It's never going to end. Because guess what? New characters are going to be introduced. Maybe someone starts shipping, a character with an old, character that has not been seen in the anime, or a character that shows up in the game or something. It's just going to be constant. The shipping community in Pokemon is a constant circle that will keep going and just starts expanding. It just expands, kind of like the universe, because the more characters they introduce and the less chances that they ever acknowledge or reveal any ship to be canon. It's just going to keep expanding. It's going to keep expanding. Constant expansion, because that's what I think in general is a good representation of what shipping should be, where people are allowed to ship and continue shipping many different characters with however they wish. That is what's fun about being a shipper, right? I think the Pokemon shipping community kind of represents that no matter what character you ship, right, at the end of the day, as long as you're having fun, then have fun with it, and if the Pokemon Company doesn't want to acknowledge like an actual ship being canon at the end of the day, it's essentially a free-for-all, and it will continue this constant debate about which ship is actually canon, right? So that's essentially what the Pokemon shipping community is. There's many different ships, many different names for these ships. The fact that they never acknowledge like an actual confirmation for a ship, it will continue this debate. It will continue this, constant fighting within the community, trying to figure out which ship is the best for Ash, for many different characters, right? I could pinpoint to like really hard evidence for many different ships in the Pokemon community. I still think, by regards, just based off of like which characters essentially got the biggest advantage, is probably Sedna, simply because she apparently is the only one that has ever kissed Ash, if you don't count the movie with Latias in it, right? That's like the biggest like hint that like maybe the Pokemon Company is actually trying to do something. But again, you don't know because they never confirmed anything, right? The only thing they gave you is that she's actually one of the few characters who actually decided to go strong, for the male lead. And, that's what the more shippers have in it as an advantage over like any other Ash ship. But again, they never confirmed it. So it will be still a constant debate, because you still don't know who Ash really liked. Ash is dense, right? He doesn't think about that sort of thing. Granted, yes, he's 10 years old, so he probably does not think about this as much as like maybe female characters do, right? In terms of like how the Pokemon Company presents female characters in the anime, where they have crushes, even though some male characters also had crushes on other characters as well. But like, yeah, it's just constant. It will continue to be this constant debate, and at the end of the day, unless the Pokemon Company comes out and says something about whether or not a ship is canon that I at least have no knowledge of them ever doing, the shipping community in Pokemon will always be active. Right? It will always be active no matter what. I think at the end of the day, the shipping community in Pokemon is a fun one. There is constant debates. It can be toxic. There's no question about it. Especially with like the whoever Ash winds up with, because there's been a lot of toxic situations in terms of like Ash ships, right? But I think in general, the Pokemon shipping community is still one of the more healthier ones, and that's really not saying much. Because at the end of the day, shipping communities can be very, very toxic, right? It's just because of it being so saturated with many different characters, it's less toxic because there's not one group of people just ganging up on another, you know, or one group of people, or one group of ship that's like really going against, one ship. You could argue poke shipping is that one group that gets constantly targeted because there's so many different ash ships, but I haven't seen, at least in recent memory, so much like constant fighting, within the Pokemon community that really go after Poke Shippers. But I will say Poke Shippers probably get the most targeted because they're the OG ship, right? They're the OG ship that many people have originally, liked. And at the end of the day, as more characters were introduced, more ships were introduced, a lot of people either switch over to a different ship and making Poke Shippers a little bit weaker in terms of like popularity, right? It still is the most popular ship in the Pokemon community. There's no question about it. Even after, Ash and Misty not even having sort of interaction for long periods of time, there's been a few episodes here and there, it is still by far, I think, the biggest shipping community in Pokemon. So that is essentially the shipping community. I think that, at the end of the day, it was fun. It is a fun shipping community, and there are going to be bad apples no matter which ship you like in Pokemon, or in general in any ship, and there is always going to be constant debates and constant fights between ships for Ash. I think that's where one of the biggest fights for and the biggest shipping war is for Pokemon. It will always be there because there's never been a confirmation. There has never really been a huge confirmation of who Ash likes or who Ash will end up with. Many will speculate, of course, but at the end of the day, we will never know because, frankly, I don't think the Pokemon Company will ever do so, right? Unless they do some sort of movie or something. The Pokemon series, the Pokemon anime is never going to go away. It's going to constantly be, happening. It's going to be in production. Even after Ash left, they continued the production of it, and it's never going to end. At the end of the day, it's just going to be a constant thing where people will debate. So, but that was the shipping in video for Pokemon. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Again, I apologize if I rambled a little bit all over the place, but essentially, I hope you at least get the idea of what the shipping community was like in Pokemon, and whoever you're shipping Pokemon, have fun with it, have fun, enjoy it, and yeah, so thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day. All right, I'll see you on the next shipping in video. Bye bye everyone.